I've spent over 2,000 hours in Foxhole, fighting on the fronts, doing logistics, building, and living through many of its wars. But after this much time, the way I see the game has started to change. Some parts I still love, and other parts I'm starting to notice cracks in my mentality with certain aspects of the game. I'm honestly starting to feel a bit jaded towards specific things in the game. I purchased Foxhole back on July 7th, 2021, over 5 years ago now. I still remember jumping into War 79, full of energy and excitement and ready to explore this strange new world. What pulled me in right away wasn't the combat, but the logistics side of the game. The idea that everything from the bullets in a rifle to the tanks on the battlefield was created, transported, and supplied entirely by players fascinated me. It felt alive in a way most games never do, and I couldn't wait to be a part of it. Out of my 2,000 plus hours in Foxhole, I'd say around 1,500 have been spent on logistics alone. About 250 hours went into fighting on the front lines, another 100 hours into building bases, and another 100 working in or setting up facilities. The Navy side of this game probably makes up the last 50 hours or so. Even after all this time, I still love playing Foxhole and the experiences it creates, but I've noticed myself growing more negative towards certain things players do in the game. I don't ever act on those feelings though. I don't call people out or belittle them. It's more of an internal frustration that builds up the longer I play. I think that's just part of spending thousands of hours in the same game though. You start to notice patterns and certain behaviors can wear on you over time. Whether it's players misusing resources, ignoring strategy, or just not caring about the bigger picture. Those things can be frustrating when you've invested so much effort into a war. Still, I try to remind myself that everyone plays differently, and that variety is part of what makes Foxhole unique. And for me, most of that effort, most of my story in Foxhole, has been spent in logistics. That's where I've poured the majority of my hours, and it's where my perspective on the game really comes from. As I mentioned before, Logi is what really drew me into Foxhole from the very beginning. The idea that every resource had to be gathered, crafted, and transported by players to keep the war effort alive intrigued me. And even now, it's still the role I enjoy the most. Out of the 1,500 hours I've spent on Logi, I can probably break it down even further. I've probably spent around 700 hours in the backline, 400 in the midline, 300 delivering supplies to the front, and maybe around 100 hours doing Navy and Island Logi. Backline Logi is where I first got hooked. I loved the supply chain of gathering, crafting, and dropping items into public stockpiles for others to use. Honestly, I probably spent close to my first 400 hours of Foxhole doing just that. But over time, I wanted to step up and become a player delivering supplies directly to the front. Being the one who kept pushes alive and made sure frontline players had what they needed felt like being a true Logi hero. For frontline Logi, I'd spend hours studying public stockpiles across the map. I'd then figure out the best routes for delivery and made my runs as efficient as possible. And I loved every bit of it. Eventually though, I realized that midline Logi was where the real need was. While plenty of players enjoyed crafting in the backlines, very few wanted to do the grunt work of transporting materials forward. After about 1,000 hours, it became clear to me that transportation was the biggest bottleneck in the supply chain. That's when I shifted my focus almost entirely to midline Logi. I loved keeping these storage depots stocked so frontline players could grab supplies quickly and push forward to the front. It's easily one of the most thankless jobs in the game though. You will more than likely never get noticed for doing it, but I found a lot of satisfaction in knowing how important it really was. These days, I still enjoy all forms of Logi, but I naturally gravitate toward midline and backline over frontline runs. In any given war, I might only do 5 or 10 frontline deliveries, because I see more value in making sure the supply lines behind the front are strong. Some aspects of Logi I find myself getting frustrated with are when sometimes players complain about not having enough supplies at bunker bases. Or even worse, the opposite when other Logi players are overstocking forward positions. Sometimes I'll see forward bunkers with 800 shirts or 10,000 B mats with no defenses around, and I get frustrated that these bases are continuing to be supplied even though we know it's going to fall. Situations like this make me shake my head, but again, I don't lash out or call anyone out. I think this mentality just comes with the territory of spending so much time on one game. The little things like these examples start to weigh on you more heavily, and I think it's important to be honest about that. Burnout is something every long-term player needs to be aware of, and when you catch yourself getting too negative, it's worth stepping back to evaluate why you're feeling that way. Overall, I still love doing Logi, and I'll continue to spend most of my time in Foxhole running supplies. Looking ahead, I'd like to branch out more into Navy Logi since I've barely touched it compared to everything else. and another long-term goal of mine is to dive into train logi and hopefully help run a regiment's train network during an entire war. Though logi is what I primarily have spent most of my time doing, I have also experienced what the front has to offer as well. Out of my 2,000 hours, only about 250 have been on the front lines, a small fraction compared to the 1,500 I've poured into logi. But even in that limited time, the combat side of the game has given me some of the most intense and memorable moments that I will never forget. When I have spent time on the front, most of my time has been spent as an infantry player, or as a partisan disrupting their logi. I've also dabbled in patching up soldiers as a medic, joined artillery crews, and even tried my hand at tanking. When I'm playing infantry, I don't care much about the meta loadouts. I'd rather immerse myself in the fight, roleplay the experience, and just have fun. These days, the times I enjoy infantry the most are when I'm making shot calls, leading a flank, calling rotations, or helping coordinate pushes. There's nothing better when other players listen and a plan actually works. But I'll admit, infantry play can get frustrating fast. Dying in a simple gunfight or getting blown up by artillery wears on me quickly. After a few back-to-back deaths, I usually feel like moving on to something else. One role I've really loved over the last year is being a partisan. Sneaking behind enemy lines and cutting off their supply routes is incredibly satisfying, especially because I'm a logi player myself. I know exactly how disruptive it is when supply trucks get taken out. This role also makes me feel like I'm trying to solve some kind of puzzle. Death after death, I'm trying to find small gaps or holes in their defenses until I find the right path to break through. Once I have snuck past all their defenses, even stopping one or two trucks feels like a huge win. Artillery crew member is another role I've played quite a bit on the front, though I've found it can get repetitive. Loading and firing shells for hours isn't always exciting, but it's rewarding to know you're making an impact even if you can't see it directly. Something I'd like to do in the future is learn more about spotting. I think calling targets for the crew would make artillery a lot more engaging for me. Next, I've started playing as a medic more often, and I actually enjoy it a lot. Bringing players back into the fight and keeping the team alive feels genuinely rewarding. The downside though is that I often don't have the full picture of what's happening on the battlefield, since I need to stay back in safer positions. Still, it's one of the roles where I feel like I'm making the biggest difference on the front, and I foresee myself playing this role more and more soon. The last role I've dabbled in is tanking. I've probably only spent about 30 to 40 hours inside of a tank, and to be honest, I just don't enjoy it very much. Unless I'm yeeting a tank straight into the front, I usually find it slow and boring. Always waiting around for daylight before moving out just kills the fun for me. I'd like to learn more about tanking and figure out how to make it exciting, because I know it's an important part of the front. But for now, it's a role that appeals to me the least. While combat roles on the front have been intense and rewarding in their own ways, another side of the game that I've spent some time on is frontline engineering and building. This is where I have focused on setting up defenses and fortifying positions. Constructing bases adds a completely different layer to the battlefield, one that I've noticed can make or break a fight. Out of my 2,000 hours in Foxhole, I've probably only spent about 100 hours building defense structures or bases. Most of that time has been focused on constructing frontline defenses to hold positions or forward bunkers to support pushes. One frustrating aspect of this work is seeing it all get destroyed within seconds, normally by artillery or massive enemy pushes. There have been times I spent an hour or two building a base, only for it to be left undefended by teammates and quickly wiped out. Those moments can be really discouraging and make you feel like your time was wasted. I'd say I'm still fairly new to base building and everything it involves. Unlike other roles, this part of the game requires a strong understanding of the meta. You can't just make a base for fun without risking it being ineffective. Out of my roughly 100 hours of building, only 15 to 20 hours have been focused on midline or backline bases. During my next 1,000 hours in this game, I really want to change that and focus on these bases more. One of my goals for the future is to build a base that becomes a key point in a battle, fully fortified and well defended. I know I still have a lot to learn before attempting something like this solo, and I'll need to study and collaborate with other experienced builders first. While building bases on the front line is all about immediate defense and moving the front forward, facilities in Foxhole operate on a completely different scale. Working in and managing facilities is more strategic, long-term, and focused on keeping the entire war effort running smoothly behind the scenes. Up until War 127, I mostly worked with regiments that had large facilities already planned out. My role was mostly that of worker bee, gathering resources and keeping buildings producing the materials we needed for whatever project was underway. This current war is the first time I've built a facility completely on my own. Facilities have been in the game since September 12, 2022, so it's taken me about 3 years to finally dive into this side of Foxhole. I can't speak much about it yet because my experience is so small compared to other areas, but so far overall I've really enjoyed it. I would say facility gameplay is similar to Factorio in some ways, though I'd call it a much more simplified version. I enjoy it though because I feel like I'm making a real impact on the war effort. But I will say if you're expecting Factorio level complexity, you'll probably be very disappointed. One piece of advice I'd give is never jump straight into facility work alone. Working with an experienced facility group first is important. Solo facilities can be overwhelming, and I've seen plenty of players burn out trying to start on their own and never come back. Looking ahead, I'm excited to build more facilities and produce equipment that can directly support players on the front lines. While facilities focus on producing equipment that keep the war running, Navy gameplay offers a completely different challenge. It's all about controlling the seas and moving players and materials across islands. Objectives that are critical for the war effort but require a very different set of skills and strategy. The large Navy update came out on October 26, 2023, so it's been in the game for almost 2 years now, and I still haven't spent much time on this side of Foxhole. Out of my 2,000 plus hours, I'd estimate only about 50 have been spent on Navy related gameplay. The aspect I've contributed to the most is participating in naval invasions. These are some of the most exciting battles I've been a part of, but unfortunately they don't happen very often. One downside of Navy gameplay is how much preparation and time it requires. Even with my experience in the game, I'd still consider myself mainly a casual player, since I can't dedicate the long hours needed for large ship or submarine missions. Navy, in my opinion, requires one of the biggest time commitments in the game. If you're on a big vessel, you need a couple of uninterrupted hours to really participate. With a full-time job and family, this makes it hard for me to get involved with. I've had some really friendly players invite me on their ships or their submarines, but it's normally when I'm busy with something else with life or in the middle of the night. I've only been on large ships a handful of times and in a submarine once, and even that was very brief. From the little time I've spent out in the waters, it feels much like tanking on the front lines. I find it a bit slow since the action isn't constant. I hope to find ways in the future to make Navy gameplay more exciting for me, especially since I expect it will share similarities with the upcoming Airborne update later this year. So while my time with Navy has been limited and not always the most engaging, I like that it still adds another layer to the variety Foxhole has to offer. After spending 2,000 plus hours exploring Logi, Frontlines, building, facilities, and even a little bit of Navy, I feel like I've got a pretty full picture of what the game feels like. At this point, I think it's worth talking about where I feel Foxhole currently stands and how the game has grown over the years. One thing I've come to really appreciate is the community. Over time, I've met a lot of great people both in and out of the game. Players who are quick to teach me something new or jump in to help with the project. Of course, like any community, Foxhole has its share of overly negative players, whose sole purpose seems to be making sure others have a bad time. But thankfully, those players are easy enough to mute or avoid, and I don't believe they take away from the overall positive experience. Another big reason I stick around is the dev team. I honestly think Foxhole has one of the best development teams out there. They've consistently pushed out free updates every few months, and each one adds meaningful content to keep the game fresh. If I had one wish, it would be for more communication from them between updates, but overall, I can't complain about the level of support and care they've shown in this game. As for general gameplay, I've noticed how much my habits change depending on the stage of the war. When the war first starts is when I'm the most active. It's simple and chaotic and filled with a lot of grenades and gunfights. There are no tanks or artillery to blow me up, which makes the game more enjoyable. Mid-war tends to drag for me when the front lines barely move, and late war is where some of the most intense moments happen, especially last stands at bases that have been under siege for days. These are some of my favorite battles, but I will say that if I'm on the winning side, late war can be less exciting. There's normally long queues to get into fights, and the drawn-out city attacks don't have quite the same thrill as desperate defenses. I've noticed that my playstyle has shifted a lot since my first 1,000 hours. These days, I log in with a clear purpose. I know what I want to accomplish, I knock out those tasks, and then I log off. I don't wander around aimlessly as much anymore. Feels like I've grown into a more focused, goal-oriented player. And last, over the years, I've got a bit more serious about my Foxhole content creation as well, and I've spent a lot more time making sure my videos are a bit more polished and refined. I've been making videos for nearly 3 years now. On average, I would say I spend about 15 to 20 hours a week just writing scripts and editing, which over the last 3 years has added up to be over 2,000 hours of work outside of actually playing Foxhole. It's funny to think I've probably spent as much, if not more, time making content about Foxhole as I've actually played it. After 2,000 plus hours, I can honestly say Foxhole has been one of the most unique and rewarding gaming experiences I've ever had. Sure, I've had moments of frustration, burnout, and even times where I've been a little jaded, but at the end of the day, I still love this game. From running Logi lines to fighting on the front, to experimenting with facilities and even dipping into naval gameplay, it's been a wild journey. And the best part is, I feel like there's still so much more for me to explore and learn. I'm excited to see what the next 1,000 hours will bring, and I can't wait to keep being a part of this awesome community. How many hours have you played in Foxhole? What are some of your goals or things that you want to learn next in the game? Let me know in the comments. I've started uploading more to my Patreon and Ko-Fi accounts. If you would like to watch these videos, you can support me with only $1 to gain access, or you can become a subscriber as well. This really helps support the channel and helps me pay for animations, new equipment, and the programs that I use to edit. If you are unable to support the channel financially, no problem. Watching old videos or maybe videos you haven't seen before helps a lot as well. Thank you all so much for watching and for your support. Make sure to subscribe for more Foxhole content. I'll see you out on the battlefield. Cheers.